What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko, joined once again by my guy Morgan Cannon, and this is your go-to place for all things Lions related. That includes news, updates, analysis, and so much more. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the biggest thing that is currently happening in Detroit Lions news, which is the continued offensive coordinator search. It is easily the number one thing that's on people's mind, and it might just be because, listen, we're still a little too far out to talk about free agency. We're too far out to really know what's going on with the draft. You still have guys that are committing to the draft, not committing to the draft, so like it's too early to even talk about that stuff. But this is something that's happening in Detroit that is big news, because we know how important it is for Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes to get this offense back to like the standard that they are accustomed to them playing at, right?
Yeah, it has to happen in order to get where they want to get, which is ultimately winning a championship, right, Miko? So, yeah, we knew as soon as the news broke with old Johnny Morton getting let go, this was going to be the hot topic for quite a while in Detroit and like around the Lions fan base. But to be honest, man, it's the talk everywhere now, right, Miko? Because so much has happened. We went from being like, it might be like a light coaching cycle to more than a quarter of the league is up for grab right now with 9 head coaching vacancies out there.
And I think that alone has really impacted, at least from a fan's perspective, like what you think the Lions are going to reasonably be able to do in terms of finding a quality replacement at the offensive coordinator position, which, to the Lions' credit, they do seem to be taking their time, Morgan. I think Ryan and Jeremy brought it up in the POD cast, but like last year, the Lions hired John Morton after only 10 days of Ben Johnson, leaving to take the Bears job, and they already had an OC in place. The Lions definitely seem to be much more thorough in their approach, even though, unlike other teams, they're kind of being a little hush-hush about like when they've completed interviews or who they've interviewed. They're kind of just, it's almost like you kind of got to catch some of these guys at the airport, which definitely was the case with Mike McDaniel, as it seemed like the other day.
Yeah, and I think that's on purpose, Miko. Like I think they're going to do a thorough job. It's not to say that they didn't the first time around this time last year either with Morton, but they obviously came to a decision much quicker. Now, like I feel like there's so many moving parts league wide. You're going to have to, it might take a little bit of time because, they could really love the McDaniel fit or Kafka, or the two we're going to talk to about in a minute, spoiler, but they might have to wait a bit because these guys got other interviews, including maybe for a couple of the head coaching vacancies. I mean, shoot, even Kelvin Shepard, the Lions' current defensive coordinator, just interviewed for the Miami head coaching job. So yeah, I think we'll hear more as the days wear on, but who knows really, because not everything is going to get reported, which I find to be interesting, because why not? Why isn't everything reported?
Well, it kind of lines up though with what Brad Holmes said during his press conference, where he's like, hey, some of the moves that the Lions are going to make may not make headlines. And I think once again, it's on purpose to maybe to kind of control the narrative, to not over make it seem like they're over promising and under delivering in certain situations, right? If it's a lot of hype. And again, not saying that other teams are wrong for this, but if there's a lot of hype built on like, hey, we interviewed this guy, there could potentially be that feeling of like, oh, the Lions must like really, really like this guy because, they interviewed him in X, Y, and Z. Like, I think the most important thing, like you kind of said before, is that they do a thorough job and that they do make sure that they get the right guy for this team that's going to fit what Dan Campbell's vision for this offense is, or at least be able to take his vision to another level. One thing I did want to back up to is the fact that there are so many openings in the NFL right now for head coaching jobs. That also includes the fact that there are a lot of openings for offensive coordinator jobs. You and I were talking about this before we started recording. While there are currently 9 head coaching positions open, there's basically 11 offensive coordinator positions open because both the Chargers and the Eagles fired their OC. So there's just as many OC jobs open. And if you're the likes of Mike McDaniel or Kafka, maybe one of those positions are more interesting to you than even what Detroit has to offer right now.
Yeah, and because there's so many, I think that's why it's going to take so long. Like, because they're going to have to go interview. They might want to interview for the Philadelphia OC job, or who's the other offensive coordinator that just...
Greg Roman? Was that the one that you were thinking of?
Yes, yep, in LA, right, exactly. And then now, like the Steelers, you mentioned the Steelers and Tomlin and the Harbaugh in Baltimore. There's so much now that's kind of up for grabs, but who knows? Maybe, McDaniel really likes the fit in Detroit, and he knows like if he spends a couple years here, he might be able to have his pick, not, of any team, but like for that hiring cycle, maybe have a little bit better, like more leverage at the time. So we'll have to
Hmm.
kind of read that. That's all we can really do is read the tea leaves. I do find it interesting though, like just kind of painting the overall picture. They did request to interview McDaniel pretty quickly after he got let go from the Miami job. So maybe that's it, something that we can glean from, just looking at everything.
Well, and let's pivot to why we think Mike McDaniel and Mike Kafka are both good fits here in Detroit, because it for me it does go beyond the fact that they're big names. I think there's always that feeling and that desire to want to land the big fish when you're talking about coaching hires or you're talking about free agents. But with Mike McDaniel specifically, like I look at him and it goes beyond for me, Morgan, like what he did at Miami and what he did at San Francisco. You start to kind of look at his coaching history, and it's a very well, like if we were talking about resumes, it's a very interesting resume because it's a guy who has been in the league and been a part of the NFL coaching circle for quite some time, right? Came into the NFL in 2005 as a coaching intern under Mike Shanahan, spent some time with Gary Kubiak down in the Houston Texans, where they had some really good offensive years during his time there. Goes back to Mike Shanahan with the then Washington Redskins, now Washington Commanders. They have some of their best offensive seasons while Mike McDaniel is a part of that coaching staff. And the list goes on and on. Spending time with the Falcons, and like we know how talented that team was in the late 2010s, and then eventually landing in San Francisco. Like it's a very well, put together resume where he's not only been an assistant, but he's worked with specific, position groups, both wide receiver and the run game, and he's held an offensive coordinator position. So for me, it's not just the fact of like, oh, he's the guy that used to coach the Dolphins and that's why he would be a good fit here. It's like, no, you actually dive into that resume and he's kind of had his hands in a number of different things when it comes down to being the offensive mind that people think he is.
Right. And for me, like whenever I'm looking at this, I kind of look at coaching influences, like who have they spent time under? Like we know Dan's two major influences were like Sean Payton and Bill Parcells. And like there's others in there as well, I'm sure, through his Texas A&M days and all that, but those are the two he mentions quite a bit. And if you were to talk to McDaniel, I'd be interested. I need to go back and try to find some content from back then, but I would imagine Shanahan's one of his major influences, because if you got, like Miko just ran through that beautifully, but if you look at the tea leaves, like 2016 was the year the Falcons went all the way to the Super Bowl, the 28-3 game, which they lost to New England. I hated that because I was rooting against New England, I tell you that. And then, so Shanahan ends up leaving, taking the head coaching job for the 49ers, and he takes Mike McDaniel with him to be the run game coordinator. And he did that from 2017 to 2020. So you like that because if like you watch the 49ers play this coming weekend, they're going to run that football because that's the way
Yes.
with how banged up their offense right now is, man. Like their offense is right now. Excuse me, I can speak English, I promise. They're going to want to control the pace of the game, control the clock. So that excites me because as we're going to talk about it for the next 6 to 7 months, but the Lions need to get back to dominating both sides of the line of scrimmage, but really that offense, man. Because if you can do that, you can hide a lot of boo-boos, right, Miko? If you can run the crap out of the football and dictate the pace of games, then you can hide other things.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's also interesting in that is like while working with the Shanahans, like that's a again, I'm going to say a family because it's both Mike and Kyle Shanahan who have both coached and have a pretty significant fingerprint on the NFL game and how they've called offenses. But it's an offense that includes a lot of motion. It's an offense that does, like you pointed out, prioritize the run game. It may attack teams in a different way than the Lions have previously, but I think an argument could be made, Morgan, that like that's one of the things that Detroit got away from this past season was having a more diversified rushing attack and having someone like Mike McDaniel that understands the importance of that and understands the importance of, really putting your offensive line in position to succeed by giving them different assignments and being able to confuse the defense is what's going to help out your running game the most. In addition to the fact, like I mentioned, he's been a wide receivers coach too. So it's not like it's just solely, running backs and offensive line. Like he understands how to also help get his receivers into positions of high success. We talked about him being on the coaching staff with, in 2015 and 2016, working with Julio Jones and Roddy White during that time, like had to be amazing, right? You talk about his time in Washington. Pierre Garcon had one of his best years with Mike McDaniel as his wide receivers coach. So, like, again, I think it expands throughout the entirety of your offense if you could potentially land a guy like him to be the one calling the shots for your offense.
Yeah, and he's a smart guy. Like, Dan's going to recognize that. Like, Dan's a football mind, an offensive mind himself. So you look at what Shanahan has done since 2016 now in San Francisco, and it's impressive. And a lot of what McDaniel brought to Miami was very similar, especially in those early years. They were kind of clicking at that point because he had the offensive line. Tua was, say what you will, at that point, he was very accurate and he could play. He threw with a ton of anticipation, which is important in a lot of what McDaniel was doing in Miami. A lot of things were based on timing, like a lot of timing, throwing to a spot and being smart with the football, like knowing quickly like what the defense is giving you post snap and getting the ball to your playmakers. That should excite you as Lions fans because we know how deadly the Lions weapons are. You know, JMO, Saint, Jameer after the catch, Sam even, you know. So yeah, a lot of pre-snap motion. So it would be a return to, you know, what we hear a lot about Ben Johnson was he was a stickler for the details.
Yeah.
And that's not to say Dan isn't, but when you're doing a lot and you're kind of making a change in the middle of the season as a play caller, you get away from that a little bit. So if McDaniel were to come in here as the offensive coordinator, I would expect him and Dan to return the offense to, it's going to be complex, but that's okay because Jared Goff is a smart, veteran, competent quarterback. So I have no doubts that he can do this and probably has a stronger arm than Tua. So I'm sure McDaniel would be excited to come here because in a lot of ways, it's got some similar elements to that offense, that doomsday offense that him and Shanahan were working in San Francisco.
Absolutely. And I that's one of the reasons why I think he is like the hot name. It's the name that everyone would love to see the Lions announce as like, hey, this is who we're hiring as our offensive coordinator. And I said it on the podcast this week. I think after the Ravens job, and that's even with like the Eagles making the announcement that like they are looking for an OC, I still think the Lions job is the next best job outside of getting the head coaching job for the Ravens. Like if you get an opportunity to coach Lamar Jackson, I feel like anybody would jump at that in a heartbeat. But to your point that you made even earlier, coming to a team like Detroit and being able to pad your resume even more and to work with an offense that even in a down year was still like one of the top offenses in the league could do wonders if you truly are trying to get back into the head coaching circuit, and you will more than likely be a hotter commodity and probably be the most sought after coordinator, kind of like how we're seeing with Robert Saleh right now with the 49ers again. And he had a disaster of a time with the Jets, but it being able to show that like no, there are elements of you being able to coach and lead a team or even just lead a group can still do wonders of getting you back into that conversation. With that said, outside of Mike McDaniel, there is another Mike that is worth talking about, and that's Mike Kafka, that I think is a great, I don't even want to say it's a consolation prize, but I think it would also be a great hire if the Lions aren't able to land McDaniel because he equally has an impressive resume, right, Morgan?
Yeah, and I like Kafka honestly just as much as McDaniel. I know McDaniel was a head coach and, you know, but hear me out if you're going to yell at me in the comments. And yeah, I love the point that you made about Saleh, man, because it's kind of the similar trajectory, you know. So I think that'd be a good situation. And the cool thing is, man, the Fords, they'll cut that check. I know people say what you will about, you know, different aspects of it, but they don't care. They'll be like, yeah, there's no salary cap for coaches, people. So they can they can pay him as much as they want if they want to.
OC if you want to.
Boom, that's fine. That's perfect. They don't care. I promise you. They want to win. But yeah, Kafka has had an interesting arc too. So played in the NFL for several years at quarterback, and then began his coaching career in 2016 with Northwestern, just as a graduate assistant. So low on the totem pole, but quick ascension, man. 2017. Lands with the Chiefs as offensive quality control. So if to make this not a super long video, just think of like an offense, a general assistant. They're going to do things with film, help set up the practice schedules each week, do that kind of stuff. Then he became the quarterbacks coach and the passing game coordinator through 2018 to 2021. So a similar trajectory, to like what Dan, not an apples to apples comparison, but what Dan did with, like Scotty Montgomery and people like that, like being the assistant head coach, right? Montgomery was last year.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
right.
I think
Because it was,
I think he still is this year too, as
yeah,
well.
exactly. Yeah, because Deuce was before that, Deuce Staley. If you guys
Yep.
remember that, so that intrigues me, man, because Andy Reid, to make things simple, he has like some Bill Walsh. If you got young people watching this, is like, who is Bill Walsh? Google him. We're not going to talk about Bill Walsh here. Old, but it's like a foundational offensive mind in the NFL. But the cool thing about Andy Reid, and I'd hope Kafka could bring that to Detroit, is they want to build an offense that can beat anything, because Andy Reid famously has binders and binders of, schemes and things he can go to depending on who they're playing. Because in my opinion, that's the best way, both defensively and offensively, to give yourself the best chance to win week over week, right, Miko? Like tailoring the scheme and what you're doing that week against the opponent.
Yeah, and I did just want to clarify, like you talk about him being able to have that time with Andy Reid, but then he also does spend those 4 years with Brian Dable in New York, where that is where he gets his opportunity to be that offensive coordinator. And we did see this past season, once the Giants moved on from Dable, it was Mike Kafka that got the nod to be the interim head coach during that time. And so like that quick ascension does speak volumes when you talk about a guy that, graduate assistant in college 1 year, immediately gets an opportunity with one of the best franchises at that time. Like this is at the heat of when like the Chiefs are building and establishing that dynasty, and he's working hands on with Patrick Mahomes. So again, understands not just what it means to work under a great head coach, but also understands to what it's like to work with a generational quarterback at that time. And while his time in the Giants can be definitely questioned as the offensive coordinator, there's a number of things that just kind of don't quite make sense with how the Giants were operating, specifically during those years where Daniel Jones was the quarterback. Things definitely looked more intriguing and seemed to be trending in the right way once the Giants kind of transitioned over to Jackson Dart, once Cam Scadaboo started kind of getting things going. Unfortunately, like Malik Neighbors was lost pretty early in the season, so we weren't able to see how that was also going to like change things. But I think enough was done with Mike Kafka to at least lay the groundwork where it's like, man, if you can kind of put him in a situation where things are maybe a little bit more settled, he has quality pieces around him, and again, maybe a good head coach to possibly report to and execute a vision, maybe he can put together a really impressive offense for another NFL franchise.
Yeah, and that's good context too, because with the Giants, like they've had some tumultuous times at quarterback, man. They tried a couple different things before
Mhm.
they got Dart this past year, and the offense was looking pretty. It was, kind of gimmicky, but because you're playing with a rookie quarterback that probably has a bit of a ways to go in terms of his development, but it was working because he can run the ball. Scadaboo was a unique back, we'll say. So I think that gives you a couple different, examples of him tailoring an offense similar to what we talked about with Andy Reid, like tailoring an offense to your talented, like to your skill guys, so that gives me confidence, like that Kafka could see the Lions roster and just get more out of it as the offensive coordinator, because you have unique pieces all over the place that you can, you want to maximize this window, man, because you have so many amazing, get the offensive line back to where it is and back to where it was, excuse me, and then just let the skill guys go crazy, because any offensive mind would be like chomping at the bit to work with this group.
No, absolutely. And again, for more context, you talk about that 2024 season. The Giants had four different quarterbacks play that season, right? Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, Tim Boyle, all played quarterback at some point in time in that season. You fast forward to this year, while the record isn't good, right? 4-13 for the season, they still had like about a top 20 offense. They had one of the better rushing attacks in the NFL. So a lot of that credit equally has to go to Mike Kafka. Like the roster got a little bit better, got healthier probably in some areas, because I do think they had a lot of like offensive line issues in 2024. You get a healthier offensive line in 2025. You get a better, a more aggressive back in Cam Scadabo. I think even uh what's his name? Jeez, I'm blanking. Oh, Tyron Tracy had a good season
But
as
yeah,
well. Evan
I mean,
Singletary had some good games out there.
yeah.
You found ways of being productive in the running game. And so you talk about coming to an offense that features Jameer Gibbs at least as a mainstay right now, and potentially a David Montgomery, then like man, maybe he can make some magic work in Detroit with those pieces. So those are definitely two names that are worth keeping in mind. And like I said, McDaniel is clearly, I think, number one with a bullet for most people. He's the dream scenario, but kind of like I meant to say at the beginning of this video, and if I didn't say it, I'm going to say it now. I do think one thing that Lions fans have to get comfortable with is realizing that with there being so many head coaching positions, with there being so many offensive coordinator positions, there is always the possibility that Mike McDaniel chooses another opportunity. And I think that's something that we have to get comfortable with. Like, I can sit here and say that this is the most attractive job out there, but he's the one that has to make the decision. I think Morgan, though, no matter what ends up happening, I do think the Lions are going to get a better than what they possibly had in John Morton. And that's no slight at John Morton. I just think that like Dan and Brad are going to be much more aggressive this offseason in a number of areas. And I think it's going to start with offensive coordinator and what they expect their OC to do from day one.
Yeah, and I think that's going to hopefully be better communicated, because I think they were thinking it was just going to kind of be this little changing of, just like boom, turnkey, like John,
Turnkey
you just
offense.
pick up this offense and go. Like that's all well and good, but I think you need to, build on it a little bit, and that's going to be hopefully whoever comes in, whether it's McDaniel or Kafka or whoever, they get in with Jared Goff right away. Like, go hang out in California with Jared, whatever you got, but work on it. Cause I think that's important too, to kind of build that continuity and just be hot from the beginning, be hot in July once training camp starts. So, and I do find it interesting for Kafka too. I mean, him being the offensive coordinator and the assistant head coach the past 2 years, he could look at this as a really good opportunity too, because you do well in Detroit for a couple of years, you might have your pick a similar situation, but not exactly the same, because he hasn't been a head coach yet like McDaniel, but similar path to being like, hey, I'd like to be the head guy again, but I want to make sure that I have my pick of the litter, kind of how Ben Johnson did over a couple cycles. So that might be kind of the new way some of these guys approach it, because I think guys are starting to see, man, some of these jobs, yeah, you're the head coach of the Miami Dolphins or the Cleveland Browns, but for how long, unfortunately,
I mean, I think that's an underlying issue, or an underlying like truth that I think a lot of people haven't talked about. Like we are heavily fixated on how many jobs are open, and someone's going to take these jobs, right? At the end of the day, the Titans job is going to get filled by somebody. Somebody is going to be the next head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Someone is going to be the next head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. Like, regardless of where those franchises are now, they're going to get somebody, and that person, whoever it may be, is going to have an opportunity to turn those franchises around. But like, yeah, forgive us if we kind of believe that like coming into a situation like what Detroit has could be a little bit better for certain people if they do in fact meet the standards that Brad and Dan are kind of setting and what they're looking for in an offensive coordinator. So it's going to be a situation that's going to be continued to be monitored over the next couple of weeks. It's going to be interesting to see how quickly the Lions, it's going to be interesting to see if the Lions continue to like kind of move at this pace. Maybe there's coaches that are currently in the playoffs that they're hoping to be able to interview once they make their exit. Who knows? But like I said earlier, Morgan, I have a lot more confidence. I'm not saying I didn't have confidence last year, but I have even more confidence going into this, round of looking for an OC for the Lions going into 2026.
Yeah, because I think Dan, that's the cool thing. Like he doesn't make the same mistake twice. So, and he admits a mistake pretty quickly. We've seen it with Anthony Lynn and now John Morton. He's quick to be like, yep, oops, that didn't work. So I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do better this time. So I think it's going to move quicker than we're giving it credit for. I don't know why. I feel like it might be in like the next week or two. They're just, hopefully someone knocks their socks off and they're ready to just get it going. I hope it's not in the playoffs, man. I don't want to wait that long. It's gonna take.
I mean, if the guy they want is in the playoffs, and if the guy that's going to take this offense to the next level is currently coaching a position group or an offense that's currently in the playoffs, listen, I'll wait as long as it takes to get that guy.
That's a good point.
With that said, guys, if you are looking for any more additional Lions news or updates or analysis on anything, you can always head over to the prideofdetroit.com website. There are new articles being put up over there each and every day, multiple times throughout the day. Also, if you want to continue to support the YouTube channel or just be able to be locked in a little bit more to when we upload new videos or when we go live over here on YouTube, all you got to do is hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That makes it easier for you to find our content. It also helps out our channel immensely, as it kind of helps us expand and get, a few more new viewers and a few new subscribers here and there. So yeah, also be sure to let us know in the comment section below, who is the head coach, who is the offensive coordinator that you are most excited for or would like to see land in Detroit? And is there a dark horse that you haven't heard anybody mention, but like is actually kind of high on your list? Let us know that in the comment section below. And like always, we appreciate your guys' support, and we'll see you guys in the next one.